Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this important Waterloo City Council at Large runoff forum organized by the Blackhawk County NAACP and the Blackhawk Bremer League of Women Voters. We appreciate your commitment to informed civic engagement. It is with regret and disappointment that we must inform you that one of the candidates, Steve Simon, despite our invitation, has chosen not to attend the forum tonight. Mr. Simon has, however, expressed that he will submit a statement to be read during opening statements, if we see fit, which we do, as both of our organizations are committed to nonpartisan and respectful dialogue. We rise above such instances, and we focus on the exchange of ideas and information that is the essence of these forums. We remain dedicated to upholding the integrity of both of our organizations, and in the spirit of fairness, we will proceed later by reading Mr. Simon's statement during opening remarks. We do believe in providing equal opportunity to candidates to share their perspectives. Thank you for your understanding, and let's continue to engage in a constructive and informative Q&A with the candidate who is actually present, Jonathan Grider. So let's get started. Like I said, good evening and welcome to the 2023 Waterloo City Council at Large Forum, proudly sponsored by both of our organizations. I am one of your moderators. My name is Vicki Brown, and I am a member of the Blackhawk Bremer League of Women Voters, and I'm also a member of the Blackhawk County NAACP. And we will have our other moderator introduce himself.
Good evening. My name is Dave Kivett. I pastor a church here in the Cedar Valley, and I'm a member of the Blackhawk County chapter of the NAACP.
Since we don't have multiple candidates here tonight, let me just explain to everyone what the procedure will be. We're going to allow the candidate to have an opening statement, and then after that, we have prepared questions that we are going to ask. And while the candidate is being asked questions, if there's anyone that has any questions they would like to ask, they will submit those to our people that are sitting out. Will come out and collect your questions. The questions will be screened by Pat Harper. And we want to find out, what you want to know about the candidates who join us tonight, about the candidate who joined us tonight. I don't imagine that we will have a problem with time. However, Jerry Hagman is our timekeeper, and you will have 2 minutes. So please look at Jerry as you're speaking. As for this election, if there's anyone with the sound of my voice haven't already voted, I just want to reinforce that you can vote early. You can go over to the election office tomorrow and you can cast your vote weekdays tomorrow through Tuesday, December 4th from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And on election day, December 5th, you will have to go to your polling location. The polls are open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. And if you're not registered, please see one of us after the forum. I want to thank everyone in the audience for coming tonight, and I want to thank people who are watching this tonight. But most of all, I really want to thank the candidate who actually accepted our invitation and joined us here. So let's at least applaud him. Thank you. As I said earlier, regrettably, Steve Simon has conveyed his inability to join us this evening, and we do acknowledge and respect his decision. However, in the spirit of maintaining an inclusive and informative discussion, Mr. Simon has prepared an opening statement that Dave Kivett will read to you now.
Before I read that statement, let me share with you the email that was received from Mr. Simon yesterday. It's addressed to Blackhawk County NAACP and League of Women Voters. I trust that is a typo. And it reads, I regretfully will not be able to attend your forum on the 29th due to a commitment that I've been unable to reschedule. With this compressed timeline of this runoff election, it is very difficult to maintain obligations to the campaign and to family. I very much appreciated attending your forum during the regular election cycle. We will submit a statement tomorrow which can be read during opening statements if you see fit. Thank you, in regards, Steve. And this is his statement. Good evening, Waterloo. I'm Steve Simon, and I'm running for your next Waterloo City Council at Large representative. Regretfully, due to a prior commitment, I am unable to attend tonight. During the regular election cycle, it was a great pleasure to participate in 3 forums hosted by the UNI Student Government, NAACP League of Women Voters, and the Rotary Club. I'm a Waterloo native, born and raised right here. I grew up in a Northeast Waterloo Union household in the Greenbrier. I graduated Columbus Catholic in 1984 and attended UNI. Soon after, I became a dental technician. For the last 20 years, I've been the owner of a local dental lab. I enjoy getting out in our community, whether it's playing in golf leagues, pool leagues, bowling teams at Maple Lanes, and softball. Local softball especially played a huge part in my life and led to many, many friendships. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Amy, and I have 3 children. Waterloo has been good to me and offered me so many opportunities. It's time for me to give back. Additionally, the birth of my first grandson has inspired me to help our youth grow up to be strong citizens in a thriving Waterloo. I see several areas where we need to improve as a city. First, responsible spending. Over the last 4 years, we've taken on a tremendous amount of debt. We must get our spending under control. This means working to retire debt from our business districts. It doesn't mean that we should stop investing in Waterloo, but we must work on development projects more efficiently. My vision is that our economic development department has a one-stop shop for developers. We need to streamline our projects and spend your tax money wisely. Secondly, we must end divisive politics. The City Council is not a place to push a national partisan agenda. I pledge to stick to the scope of city government work and focus on what unites us, working on roads and bridges, keeping our neighborhoods safe, and economic growth. Finally, supporting first responders. During the last 4 years, we watched a major exodus from our police department. 17 officers left the force. We lost a lot of ground. This must never be repeated. It isn't just one person that has gotten us back on track. I'm dedicated to our first responders and giving them the tools they need for the job. I believe addressing our crime problem starts with enforcement. It also needs to include helping our kids by partnering with our faith communities, sports programs, and mentoring organizations. My campaign is one of unity. I'm grateful and humbled to have supporters from a diverse group of community leaders from both sides. My endorsements include Sheriff Tony Thompson, former Police Chief Dan Trelka, the firefighters PAC, Councilman Dave Boson, Jim Lynn, Pastor Corey Holmes, and many others. We are a coalition of people that appreciate simple, common sense principles. Waterloo, I'm asking you to join my coalition. Vote Steve Simon on December 5th. That is his statement.
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Jonathan Greider, you may begin your opening statement.
Yes, first I'd like to thank you, Ms. Vicky, and Pastor Kivett for moderating, as well as the League of Women Voters of Black Hawk and Bremer County and the Black Hawk County NAACP. I am disappointed that my opponent could not make the time to continue to have this conversation in this very safe and moderated environment. I think that is a question that we should ask ourselves of, do we want a council member who can't make the time when the questions aren't that tough, and what's going to happen when the questions are. My name is Jonathan Greider. I've had the honor and privilege of serving on the Waterloo City Council for the last 4 years. And I wholeheartedly disagree with my opponent's statement that there are sides here in Waterloo. All too often we hear from folks who want to divide us up into little smaller units. This population, this color, this religion, this identity, this neighborhood, this side, that side, and the other side. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in fighting for all of Waterloo, which is what I've done for the last 4 years. Whether it was standing up to make sure that our citizens were taken care of during COVID-19, to making sure that parents could take their children out to public venues by making sure that changing stations were accessible. Whether it was fighting to make sure that for the first time in nearly a decade, that we are fully staffed for both fire and police. That did happen because of the budgets that we worked very hard on, looked for specific answers, and made tough choices. I have spent my time up here on council not fighting against anyone, but fighting for the people of Waterloo, no matter their identity, no matter whom they love, no matter how they worship, no matter what they believe or what street they live on. My job up here is to fight. That is my job every other Monday and whenever I can. I have made sacrifices. Right now I'm missing bedtime, which is my favorite time of the day, because my daughters and my wife and my family understand that to lead means to make a commitment. It means to be putting yourselves in situations that require you to do things that aren't convenient, but to do things that are right. That is the type of leadership I will continue to bring to the Waterloo City Council for the next 4 years. I am looking forward to having a robust dialogue with the moderators, and thank you all who were able to make it tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. And now we will move into our forum questions. Mr. Kivett.
Yes. The co-moderators have a few questions for you. I had the pleasure of meeting a man who directs one of America's largest food banks, and whenever you speak with him, he doesn't respond to the question, "How are you doing?" by saying "fine." He always responds by saying, "I'm overwhelmed by opportunities." So my question for you is, what opportunities might be overwhelming you as an elected leader in Waterloo, or the city of Waterloo in general, that you're eager to address?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have been, like I said, incredibly privileged to serve on the Waterloo City Council, and there are an abundance of opportunities facing us well into the 21st century. Some of them are things that I am very, very excited to tackle, including establishing a municipal broadband network to allow all of our neighborhoods to be connected, to allow children and small businesses and folks to connect across the globe from right here in Waterloo. That is a project that I made a campaign pledge last time, and it is a campaign pledge that I have met because we are investing in our city. I am excited for the work that our city is doing on addressing the climate crisis. It is the single largest threat to humankind, and all too often folks will want to say, well, there's nothing we can do. We should just give up. It's too big of a problem. It's not too big of a problem, not for us. So what we're doing is we are looking at ways to make our buildings more efficient. We are working at ways to save consumers money by working with our partners with Mid-American, with the new changes with the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, which will help folks save money and will help us save the environment. I was very happy to lead the way on a project we're doing with the wastewater treatment facility where we're going to capture the greenhouse gases that we're emitting, clean them up and sell them on a market. Not only are we going to help the environment, but we're going to make money for the taxpayers of Waterloo. I've also been humbled over the last year and a half to lead community conversations on gun violence. We know that too many young folks are falling to the onslaught and danger of guns. I was proud to work alongside a commission that represented the whole community to offer recommendations that the council just approved before Thanksgiving to take real, actionable, science-based steps to reduce gun violence in our community. It won't be an easy lift. It's not something that will be done in a day or a week or a year, but it will save lives. And these are some of the opportunities that we need to have solid leadership on for the next 4 years, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Next question is, we've seen an increase in the number of people who are homeless. What steps can we take to address homelessness and affordable housing? What other groups might the city work with on these questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there was a meeting with downtown business owners about this issue. All too often, it's easy to say that groups of people don't belong, right? It's very common in cities across America for them just to remove homeless folks and then not really deal with the underlying issue, which is housing, which is access to medical care, including mental health care. It's access to jobs and recovery programs and jobs training. I'm not interested in the easy solutions. I don't believe that we should just arrest folks for vagrancy and then plop them somewhere else and pretend that solves the issue. We absolutely have to tackle housing. It's one of our 2030 vision plans to build 800 new housing units, renovate 800 current housing units, and to expand that. We need to make sure that Waterloo is affordable to live in, whether you rent or own the property. That means that we're going to need to work at not only filling in lots that are vacant or dilapidated in city limits, but it means looking at investing in projects like what I voted for at the North Crossing, bringing 180 new housing units to an area that hasn't seen that sort of housing investment in 50 years. But we also need to adopt policies that help folks find shelter. We know from studies that adopting a housing first policy and helping people find shelter means that all the other things will fall into place, from being able to access medical care that they need, working to provide them with recovery programs if that's what they need, job training programs. We need to look at this problem not as a problem that needs to be solved, but as people that need to be helped. And we need folks on city council who understand, who spend time talking with these folks when they're able to, and who understand that we're dealing with human beings and not just something that's bothersome.
Since it's just the three of us up here, I'd like to go back and have more of a conversation with the first answer addressing gun violence. I read the article in the Courier that laid out short-term and longer-term recommendations. Of all those different, there were like 10 of them total, I think.
Yes.
Out of all those, can you tell me 2 or 3 that you are most excited to champion and see happen in our community?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest ones is the Office of Community Connections. There are great folks doing great things in our community, from helping survivors of sexual abuse and assault, to folks who are providing youth sports activities, to folks who are providing jobs training, to folks who are providing help with rent or food. There are great folks in the Cedar Valley helping to address these issues. But what we discovered as a commission over the last year and a half is that so many of these things are siloed and that folks don't hear about them or they don't know about them. So they're missing opportunities to help lift themselves up. And so we came up with this Office of Community Connection as sort of a one-stop shop where folks could reach out to this office and say, hey, I need assistance with X, Y, and Z. And the person would, or persons would be able to help them with that. But in addition, it would be a place where we could connect with community providers, whether it's the Riverview Center or youth sports activities or those places where those folks could say, hey, we have this need, we have this ability to take on these folks. How can we work together? The great thing about city government, one of the great things about city government, is that we're so close to the people and that we can build those connections. And I think that's a vital role. And I think this office is part of fulfilling that role. The other recommendation that I'm most excited about out of all 10 of them, and I could go on for hours about all of them, is the Violence Interrupter Program. We have seen these tried out in large cities, in small cities, and they work. What they do is they hire folks who are trusted by the community, who are from the community. They're not members of the police department, but they're sort of a separate entity that goes out and serves as trusted sounding boards and arbiters for larger discussions. There are folks who go out when they hear that some rumbles of things that might be happening. They go out and have conversations with the folks that are a part of it. And they help de-escalate the situation before violence ever happens. This is critical, and we know that it's successful. We've seen cities that have tried it have reduced gun violence from anywhere between 30 and 70%. And the great thing about Waterloo is that we're not the size of a Chicago or a Minneapolis or a Boston. With a relatively inexpensive investment of a couple of interrupters, a community connection, and some of these other recommendations, we can make significant progress just by sheer law of small numbers, that there are folks that we can access much more easily than a spread out metropolis can. So those are the 2 that I'm most excited for, but I would encourage everyone to read the recommendations, to ask their council members to continue to advocate for them. These things won't be easy. They will, of course, cost money. The commission made recommendations to find funding, but we know that without someone heralding these, it's too often that sometimes recommendations can fall by the wayside.
Thank you. One of the common themes in the questions and something both you and Mr. Simon referenced is working with other groups.
Mhm.
Very important to do that. I have a particular bias relative to one of those groups. I had the opportunity to moderate the candidates forum in Cedar Falls and ask them the same question. I asked the people in Cedar Falls how they plan to work with the people in Waterloo. And now that I have the privilege to help moderate this debate, I want to ask you, how can Waterloo more effectively partner with Cedar Falls?
Absolutely. And that is a huge question. And because all too often we want to pit ourselves against each other, right? We want to compete for economic projects. I really think that the only competition that should happen between Waterloo and Cedar Falls is on the basketball court or the football field. I think there's a lot. While I've been on council, we worked with the Cedar Falls mayor and city council to come up with sort of common language on our fireworks ordinance so that folks kind of knew what they were getting into for both communities. I think that was a good first step. But I think that there are more steps that need to be taken. It's been brought up at other forums. It's very possible to be brought up here, but there is a 24/7 Wall Street report that exists in the world that I think we're all aware of that states Waterloo is the worst place in the United States, or was the worst place for African Americans to live. We're told that a lot. However, that's not what the report says. What the report says is that the Waterloo Cedar Falls metro area was the worst place. We cannot pretend that this problem does not cross city limit lines, because it does. It is an issue that both communities have to grapple with. It's a question that our nation has to grapple with. But I think it's something that we need to have frank and open conversations between the city councils, between the respective human rights commissions, because these things do not get solved. They do not get better if we don't have hard conversations about them. And I think that's worth having. I think with the folks who are coming in on the Cedar Falls City Council and the folks who are on the Waterloo City Council, as well as the mayors of both respective communities, I think that there's a lot of common ground to have those hard conversations and to find ways that we can address those issues. In addition, I think there are some other bread and butter issues we should talk about. Housing. UNI is Cedar Falls is very blessed to have UNI, but a lot of those students live in Waterloo, and that impacts our housing market. So we should have conversations about housing in the area. We should have conversations about making sure that we are attracting employers who are paying employees livable wages. I think there is a lot of fertile ground for us to have very real conversations with Cedar Falls, and I will continue to advocate that we should have those conversations moving forward.
Do you have a follow-up for that question?
I was going to follow it up with our next question is what other groups can the city work with?
Yeah, absolutely. There are, of course, the organizations that I talked about with the gun violence. Lots of providers are out there. I believe that we should continue to work with our faith communities, all of our faith communities. Waterloo is incredibly religiously diverse. We have everything from the East Side Ministerial Alliance to several mosques, synagogues. So we have large populations of folks, and we should be engaging those folks in conversations because everyone should be welcome at the table of power. In addition, I think that we need to continue to work to have conversations with young folks. I was very happy to be the first West High sponsor for the Waterloo Youth City Council, which was able last year to get a law passed that helps address mental health across the state. We need to be talking to young folks because we know that there is a brain drain on a state level and on a regional level. And that means that we need to be figuring out what actually attracts young folks back to the area, whether it's jobs or access to childcare, which is an issue that I've worked to address, housing. These are things we need to be having those conversations. We also need to be continuing to bring different groups together. Waterloo represents in many ways the population of the United States. We're very diverse, and that's important and that's critical, but we need to make sure that all of those voices are heard, whether it's our Latino community, our refugee community, our Congolese, our Liberian, our Burmese, our African American community, Folks, we need to have conversations with folks who are new here. We need to have conversations with folks who have been here. We need to be listening. And I try and do that by having monthly town hall meetings that are open to everyone so that I can talk to folks and being present for all the folks. And that's what I'm going to continue to do for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you please tell us, name one key difference between you and the other candidate? And why should someone vote for you instead of the other person?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. It comes down to leadership. I am proud to be endorsed by all of the folks who have endorsed me, which is a broad coalition of folks that represents Waterloo. I am proud of the hundreds of small dollar donations that I've gotten that have fueled this campaign, that have allowed us to take our message to every precinct and every ward in the city. I've never had to hide who I am. I am proud of who I am. I'm proud of the people that I associate myself with. I'm proud of my positions. I have never had to hide or ask people not to talk about those things. I've never had to tell my campaign staff to not let someone near me and then had my picture taken with that person at my election party. I have worked hard to be open and honest and transparent. What you see with me is what you get, for better or worse sometimes. But that's me. I am who I am. I've never had to fudge the truth so that someone will vote for me. That's why I think folks should vote for me. You may not agree with me all the time, and that's absolutely okay. We shouldn't all agree all the time. We are dealing with big, important issues. But I can tell you, I will always, always be honest with you. And that's what's most important.
So that's one of the main key differences between you and the other candidate?
I believe that my leadership style of being open and honest and transparent is a key difference, yes.
Thank you.
Earlier, the co-moderator asked me if I had any follow-up, and now I just figured out what that follow-up is relative to working with Cedar Falls. The all-white Board of Regents for the state of Iowa voted to do away with the diversity, equity, and inclusion offices at our 3 state universities, except for that programming which is mandated by state and federal laws.
Sure.
I will not be voting in this election because I live in Cedar Falls.
Sure.
That's going to have a huge impact on Cedar Falls and Ames and Iowa City, and I believe Waterloo.
Yes.
How can Waterloo and Cedar Falls work together, and maybe even possibly with Ames and Iowa City, to express their disagreement with the state's position on that and affect positive change rather than the negative consequences that would come about from, in essence, telling people that they're not welcome here?
Yeah, and this is born out of a politics that says that we should be colorblind, right? That we should pretend that there aren't any differences, that we have to erase color in order to see people as people. And I reject that wholeheartedly. I teach history. I teach the whole history. And there are uncomfortable things that have happened in our nation's past, as there have been in most nations. And slavery and our treatment of Native Americans is our nation's original sin. Now, there will be a lot of folks who will tell you, there have been some of folks who are up on this dais in the past who will tell you that, well, Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech in 1963. They passed the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act of 64 and 65, and racism was gone. Those folks are wrong. And the reason that I know that those folks are wrong is because I can look at the data. I can look at the data that says that here in Waterloo, up until the late 60s, early 70s, there were neighborhoods that were specifically redlined. And I know what that does. That's prevented African American folks from accumulating generational wealth that would allow them to move up in socioeconomic status. I can look at the data that says being an African American woman who's pregnant in Iowa is more dangerous than living in some third world countries. I can look at the data that says the average white family in our area has an average yearly income of $50,944, and that the average African American family has a yearly income and wealth of $3,463. Those aren't choices. Folks will tell you it's choices. They'll tell you that that's because that's what people choose. Listen, I haven't been around that long, just 33 short years, but I have yet, in my 33 years on this planet, to meet a person who wants to live in poverty. I have yet to meet a person who wants to live in a rental property where rats and cockroaches rain down because it's all that they can afford to be there for walls. I have yet to meet a person who wanted to be told that their family couldn't buy a house in this neighborhood, that there was already another buyer, even though they drove by for 6, 7, 8 months while that house stood empty. We cannot pretend that racism does not exist. And that means that we need to address it and have hard conversations. We had hard conversations in this chamber about changing an insignia that made members of this community feel unsafe, unheard, and not trusted. Those were hard conversations. I don't regret having those conversations because those conversations are worth having, because we can only achieve the American promise of equality for all when we address the things that have made us unequal in the past. So we need to have a very real conversation. I think that with things like the 1619 Freedom School that we have here in Waterloo, that we should open ourselves up to offering some of the diversity training and the diversity program that the state is mandating that universities don't do. And open that up to both communities, to all communities, so that we can have those conversations. I believe that we need to do more to highlight the diversity and greatness of Waterloo, because the greatness of Waterloo is not that we all look or think or worship or love the same. It's that we do all of those things different and then come together to build the best community in the United States, in my opinion. So we need to keep having those conversations. We need to keep pushing. Some folks will call that divisive national politics. What I call that is healing. What I call that is addressing our challenges and meeting opportunities of the next generation. What I call that is treating everyone with dignity and respect and not pretending like bad things didn't happen, but fixing them and moving forward hand in hand together.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you tell me what specific policy proposals do you have to reduce violent crimes in our community, including thoughts on existing recommendations?
Yes. So luckily, the existing recommendations are mine. So like we talked about, the Community Connection Office, the working to build the coalitions, as well as the Violence Interrupter Program. One thing that I've been very interested in is that Omaha has adopted a program called Omaha 360, which is a monthly meeting of a variety of stakeholders: governments, nonprofits, transportation authorities, the school district. And they have monthly meetings and they look at the data and they look at where the data is going, what neighborhoods are in fact impacted, and how it affects all of them, because violence isn't just limited to one neighborhood. We can't pretend that it's just a, oh, those people problem. It impacts all of us. And if we can't see the humanity in the fact that young folks shouldn't die because of gun violence, which I think we should, but let's talk about the dollars and cents. Every time that there's a call made for shots fired in the city of Waterloo, it costs taxpayers somewhere around $25,000. That's in terms of salary, that's in terms of deploying equipment, that's in terms of time, and that's even if it doesn't include overtime. We need to address this issue not because it's some pet project, as some people will say, but because it's real and worthwhile, and that no one should die because of gun violence. And so these recommendations are important that I put out because they're actually addressing the issue. Some of them are things we're already doing. We have a neighborhood patrol officer program. I am looking forward to continuing and expanding that so folks can draw connections with their neighborhood patrol officers. Some of it's stuff that we can do with partners like Mid-American to establish a base level of lighting, because we know, again from science, that a certain level of lighting keeps people safe. It reduces crime. So we can do these things. They are possible. These are not pie in the sky, wishy-washy things. They're real concrete things that government can do to make people's lives better. We need leaders who understand that. We need leaders who are intimately involved in reading the literature and talking to these partners. And that's critical because lots of things come across this dais. Lots of things go through the mayor's office. And that's why we need voices up here who are going to advocate for the things that help our constituents. And these recommendations on gun violence will do exactly that.
David?
We have one more question that the moderator's prepared, and I want to share this question with you and then also include something I found on Mr. Simon's campaign website, which may address this question from his perspective. The question is this: how do state and national politics impact your work on the local level? And then according to Mr. Simon's website, campaign website, he writes, family first always, in all caps, no divisive national politics. Our city policy measures should support the family core and promote unity over division. The family unit is the basic building block of an economy and community. I'm a firm believer that parents know how to best address their children's needs and welfare. How would you respond to the question and to Mr. Simon's position as stated on his campaign website?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I'd ask the question of what type of families is Mr. Simon talking about? I think that's important. What Mr. Simon is alluding to, that he won't say outright, is he's alluding to the conversion therapy conversation we had as a city. Listen, I'm a parent. I have 2 beautiful girls. I love them to death and I would do anything for them. But that's not the conversation that we're having. Folks like to muddy this issue. We saw it at several meetings where folks would come up here to muddy the issue, including Mr. Simon's campaign manager, and make this issue not about protecting gay kids from a form of pseudoscientific treatment that leads to increased rates of death and suicide and anxiety, but they wanted to muddy it with something scarier. They wanted to muddy it with people that are other, that are different, that we see regularly lambasted by state and national politicians. So I frankly find it laughable that my opponent wants to talk about not bringing in national politics when he's associated with so many folks who have brought national anti-LGBTQ politics to the Cedar Valley. Listen, conversion therapy doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. There are studies that it doesn't work. Every major medical association in the United States says it doesn't work. And even if we didn't have any of those things, even if we somehow believed that being LGBTQ wasn't an immutable trait that you were born with, but rather something that someone takes on and off, which is in and of itself very problematic. Gay people are gay. Let's just accept them for who they are and let them live their lives. But let's deal with a hypothetical situation. What if there were groups that were attempting to turn straight children gay? We'd burn it down, right? Not only do I know that that's a fact, I know it's a fact because that's what national and state and local leaders are telling us is happening. They're telling us that books are turning our kids gay, that if our kids look at pictures, that all of a sudden they'll start wearing dresses or pants. Come on. It's 2023, folks. Gay people exist. They've always existed. They should be allowed to exist. They should be allowed to love and have families and achieve their joys and feel their sorrows and express their angers just like the rest of us. I am not interested in turning back the clock and living through the second lavender scare. I am not interested in telling some of our neighbors that they should be quiet, that their families aren't really families. And not only should they go back in the closet, but we should bar the door. I'm not interested in the conversations that Ron DeSantis or Kim Reynolds or Donald Trump or Steve Simon are having. Gay people exist. Queer people exist. Non-binary people exist. Transgender people exist. and they are human beings. And at the very, very absolute minimum, we should treat them like human beings. And that is what I will always do on council. And if folks cannot do that, what other groups will they not treat as people when it's convenient for them?
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Oops, I'll get the one that's on the floor. You read the one.
All right. So, Mr. Ryder,
Yep.
being the only candidate here, this question is directed to you.
Okay.
The city's budget has been a hot topic. Can you elaborate on what it takes to run a city the size of Waterloo?
Yeah, absolutely I can, because I've been through 4 budgets. Running a city is not like running a business. It's not like running your family budget. One, because there are multiple streams of revenue and outflow that go into it. Our city budget is hundreds of millions of dollars across dozens of departments with hundreds of employees. It is its own unique thing. So we need to understand that government budgets are different. We also need to understand, and we hear this argument a lot, that government should be run more like business. No. Businesses exist to make profit, and that's what they should do. And I wholeheartedly believe in that part. Governments do not exist to make profit. We exist to provide services where those services would not be provided. Whether that is busing folks, whether that is plowing the streets, whether that is fighting fires, whether that is fighting crime. We have had to make tough decisions on our budget. And I paid property taxes just like everyone else. And I know what those decisions mean. That being said, I also know that we've been able to increase staffing for our police and fire so that we have more firefighters and more fire stations open than we have in quite a while. We have more police officers on the beat because of budgets that we passed. That's helping folks. What we also don't often get in this conversation about the city budget is how our state level partners are doing everything to make our job hardest. There are lots of ways that this happens, whether it was them cutting taxes, telling us they would pay us back, and then deciding that, no, just kidding, we're not going to pay you back. But I want to talk about one of the realest, most imminent problems that we're facing as a city in the next budget. The state legislature, in its infinite wisdom, passed a law that gets rid of any other additional levies that taxpayers wanted and folds them all into the city budget. The idea was they wanted to make the budget process simpler for citizens to understand, a laudable goal. However, the devil, as I say, is in the details. This legislation eliminated the library levy and the grout levy that the citizens of Waterloo have overwhelmingly passed time and time again. What this means is that those budgets and the shortfalls will fall on the city budget. Now, I will put the Grout Museum against any other museum district anywhere in the country, say the world. And I go to our library nearly every week because my kids can play games and hear stories. But I also know that our library is a place where folks can be warm. I know it's a place where folks can go and get their passport renewed, where they can look for jobs, where they can find community. It is one of the few indoor places open to the public where people can just exist without paying money. We have to consider those things. And in the next budget, we will need to make hard decisions. We always do. But we need folks who are on city council who are not going to look just at the dollars and cents, but who understand the real human impact of what cutting services will mean. And it is easy to say that they would do things differently, but not provide examples. All of our budgets are available on the internet. I have yet to hear how anyone would do anything with any of the past budgets that we voted on. We make tough decisions up here, and they're not going to please everyone. But the decisions we make are for the good of the community. And I will always put the good of the community first when I vote on city budgets.
One of the other questions from the audience is, define the role of city council person. We want your perception of the role.
So, I joke with my wife about this, that part of the role of being a city councilor is to be public property. I try very, very hard to make myself as accessible as possible. I've answered thousands of emails, thousands of calls over my last 4 years. I've hosted over 100 individual events with folks where I went to go and see an issue that they had. I've hosted dozens of meetings, whether those were specifically constituent forums or about particular issues like gun violence. In this role, you have to be accessible. And you have to be accessible to everyone. Not just the folks who will tell you that you're doing a good job. Not just the folks who vote like you. Not just the folks who make you feel comfortable. I have had some very difficult conversations with folks. And that's what this job is about. I'm not afraid of those conversations because that's called leadership. We need to be open and transparent. And at the end of the day, not everyone is going to agree with us. But if we heard as many voices as we can, if we made ourselves accessible, if we questioned why things are the way they are, and made sure that we are voting not because it's what someone else told us, not because it's a policy position that a political party has, but because it's what we are doing and feels right for who we are as a person, that's part of the job. And every vote that I've taken up here has been one that I'm willing to stand behind from now until the end of my life. Because every vote that I have taken up here has been based on what I heard and has been based on what is right. And that's what folks should expect from their city council members.
Thank you, Mr. Greider. Another question from the audience is, does the city council have the need to protect citizens?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes, of course. And that protection looks different, right? I would guess some folks would hear that question and would think, oh, police and fire. Absolutely. I'm the son of a firefighter. I've made sure that we have enough firefighters to keep all the stations open. I've made sure that we have enough police officers that we are at capacity in terms of staff hiring. Absolutely. I am all there for that protection. I am all there for making sure that our public works department is staffed so that they can plow our roads and get our garbage and make sure that water flows to our houses. Absolutely. But there are other types of protections that we need to ensure. And one of those is representation and speaking up when things are wrong. Mr. Simon alludes to it, and other folks allude to it, that it's not the job of the city council to protect LGBTQ folks. Or one of his endorsers says that it's a pet project to deal with gun violence. That's not true. I swore an oath to the Constitution, which guarantees equal protection of the law for everyone. Not just those I like, not just those that make me comfortable, not just those who go to the same church or shop in the same grocery store or love or read or think the way that I do. We have a moral responsibility as leaders to step up and protect our citizens when they are being attacked. And folks are under attack. Folks are under attack. All too often, we see on 24-hour news, on social media, attempts to dehumanize different groups of people. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in demonizing a group of people that make up a tiny fraction of our population because it's an easy way for me to win an election. I'm not interested in saying that we're not going to deal with an issue because, well, that's just an African American issue or a Latino issue or a white people issue. No. The issues that come before us aren't defined by the little categories we like to tell ourselves to make ourselves feel comfortable. The issues that we deal with are about this community, and our community is full of wonderful, different people, and we should protect all of them all the time, because that is our moral duty as leaders.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Greider.
Yeah.
One more question from the audience. There are far too many dilapidated houses in Waterloo.
Yep.
What is the goal? To see these houses torn down in a timely manner?
Mm-hmm.
Some have been abandoned for years.
Yep.
And are bringing down property value to the surrounding homes.
Absolutely. And we know that the places where these dilapidated houses often stay are neighborhoods that desperately do not need property values lowered anymore. So right now, it is a lengthy process because the courts are involved. Oftentimes we have to figure out who the owner of these houses are. Many of them are abandoned. And the courts, in what I believe is a right decision, err on the side of property owners. We don't want government to just be able to take people's property because they don't like it. That opens up a whole can of worms that I'm not comfortable with, and I don't think anyone else should be comfortable with. That being said, we need to move on these houses. I think one of the things that we need to do, that we need to bring back, we used to have neighborhood teams, and this is an area where we can work with our neighborhood associations. And folks would turn in lists of properties to code enforcement and planning and zoning that they thought were in the beginning stages of this dilapidated state. That allows us to get at the problem much, much sooner than discovering it a year or two into the process. And I've had conversations with folks who are like, well, that sat for a year. And I was like, when was the city out? Well, they were out 6 months ago, because then we eventually called them. If we know ahead of time, we can do more. So those houses need to be brought down. It's part of our 2030 vision plan. We have to respect the court process, but I think we can work with our neighborhood associations to start identifying properties beforehand. Now, that being said, I would like us to do more to prevent that from happening. There are a lot of older folks in our community who want to live and stay in their homes. But we have a hailstorm like we had last summer. Siding gets old. Maybe a gutter falls off. Sometimes these things are too expensive for folks to afford to fix, and it leads to a cascade of issues. I was working with a constituent who had the water main break, and it was going to be an $8,000 bill tacked onto her property taxes. And this woman was on fixed income. She got Social Security. And so Pastor Belinda Creighton-Smith, who's on council, and I talked with Waterworks, and we came up with a solution, and it got the water main fixed, and it helped this woman out. And that's great. That's fantastic, right? But it shouldn't require 2 council members to do that. We should have more programs that help folks who maybe don't meet the income threshold but couldn't afford a couple $1,000 home improvement to be able to get access to those funds. And whether that's working with local partners or establishing revolving funds, those are things that we need to do, because folks want to maintain their homes. No one wakes up one day and says, you know what would look good? A bunch of weeds in my front yard. No one says that. But things happen. And so we need to help them when those things happen. That's the role of government, is to help folks when things happen. Now, that being said, on the flip side, some of these dilapidated properties are bought and used as rental properties with minimal money thrown into them, and it's very apparent. folks who rent dangerous properties to individuals should be held accountable. We hired a new rental inspector that's going to help us catch up with the workload. I think that we need to add more teeth. Here's my thing. If you are a landlord and you would not live in the property that you own, then don't rent it. It is that simple. And if you can't afford it, to fix it so that other human beings can live in a safe place, then you should find someone who can. Because every person deserves to be sheltered in a safe place. So it's a holistic issue. We're going to have to come at it from multiple angles. I wish there was a magic wand that we could make it all go back, but we don't. So we're going to have to keep pushing, and we're going to have to keep having hard conversations, and we're going to have to work and talk to staff and the mayor's office and other folks, and we're going to have to work with our federal and state level partners that have money on these issues. But it can be done. These things were broken because people made choices. They can be fixed because people make choices as well.
Thank you, Mr. Greider.
Thank you, Mr. Greider. Thank you for answering all of our questions. One of the things that we worked on early on that I was particularly excited about, understanding that there would be two people here, is that you could ask each other questions. Mm-hmm. That hasn't worked out to be the case because Mr. Simon is not able to be here. But I think we could probably work that out with partners in the media. Can you tell us one question you would like to ask of Mr. Simon, and through the media, we'd like to ask Mr. Simon if he has any question that he would like to ask directly of Mr. Greider. We can put those two together and take some chocolate and some peanut butter and make a Reese's cup out of it. So what question would you like to ask of Mr. Simon?
My question, Mr. Simon, is what type of leader are you going to be? It takes time, it takes effort, it takes knowledge, it takes skill, and it takes talking to the right folks to do this job. This isn't an entry-level position. This isn't something that you can walk on day one and expect that you're going to make and solve the issues. It's hard work. So what type of leadership are you going to bring to this? What voices are you going to listen to? Who are you going to talk to? How are you going to make those decisions? And how are you going to represent all of the community and not just the ones that agree with you?
Thank you. On behalf of both of the moderators, I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Blackhawk County chapter of the NAACP for putting this together. I want to thank our timekeeper who had a lot of work to do tonight. And everybody who fielded the questions. Thank you all for being here, and have a very good evening. Thank you.